It all started with a simple favor. She was just covering a babysitting job for her roommate. She never expected to fall for the little girl's dad, and she certainly never imagined he'd turn out to be a reclusive millionaire. Maya sat on the floor of her small apartment, a needle poised between her fingers. She was carefully patching up a tear in the strap of her old, worn canvas bag. Around her, a few basic grocery items were scattered across the carpet. She counted her change one last time, her lips moving silently. Then she tucked the coins into a glass jar neatly labeled utilities. Just then her phone buzzed, vibrating against the floor. It was Brooke. Maya. Brooke's voice crackled, raspy and shaking. I can't breathe right. I think I need to go to urgent care. Maya sat bolt upright, her heart skipping a beat. Wait, what? Are you alone? Do you need an ambulance? No, I'll manage, Brooke rasped. But please, can you go to my babysitting job? It's just for a few hours. Her name's Ava. Her dad's intense, but Maya, I'm really desperate. Maya didn't even hesitate. Text me the address. I'm on my way. She grabbed her freshly sewn bag, threw on a simple cardigan, and tied her blonde hair into a neat bun. She stepped out into the fading evening light. The ache in her back from her long diner shift still lingered, but she barely noticed it. The cab ride across town took her to a neighborhood she'd only ever seen in movies. Elegant gates, perfectly sculpted, hedges and homes with names instead of numbers lined the streets. When the cab stopped in front of the Kane residence, Maya's breath caught in her throat. A massive iron gate loomed before her, guarding a mansion of gray stone and towering dark windows. It was silent, immaculate, almost too perfect to be real. She took a deep breath and pressed the intercom button. Hi, I'm Maya. I'm here for Ava, on behalf of Brooke. A sharp buzz answered, and without a single word, the gate creaked open. Maya stepped inside, gripping her bag tightly. She walked up the long, winding drive, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't a pulse of fear, but one of surreal disbelief at where she was. Never in her life had she stood before something so grand. And yet, instead of awe, she felt something else entirely. She felt small, temporary, like a visitor in someone else's fairy tale. At the massive front door, a woman in a stark black uniform opened it with mechanical precision. Follow me. Inside, the silence pressed in on her. There was no music, no laughter, just the echo of her own soft footsteps on polished marble. Towering chandeliers hung from the ceiling and oil paintings stared down from the walls. Everything smelled faintly of lemon and something sterile like a hospital. They stopped at a set of double doors leading to a room flooded with the golden evening light. It was a library, stately and utterly still. On the floor, near a large window, sat a little girl with a cascade of dark curls. She was hunched over a coloring book, her tiny hands clutching a purple crayon. Around her neck, a silver locket glinted in the light. Ava, the housekeeper said flatly. This is Maya. She'll stay with you for a little while. Ava did not look up. The woman turned and exited without another word. Maya approached slowly, kneeling a few feet away so as not to startle her. Hi, Ava. I'm Maya. Brooke is my friend, and she wasn't feeling well today, so I'm here instead. I hope that's okay. Ava remained silent, her coloring becoming more fierce and hurried. Maya sat cross-legged on the plush rug, careful not to intrude on the girl's space. I brought some stories, she said softly. Ones I loved when I was your age. Still, there was no response. Maya glanced at the page Ava was coloring. She had drawn a towering castle, but it was filled in with stormy gray and harsh purple. There was no sun, no doors, no sign of joy. I know a story about a castle like that, Maya whispered. It was big and cold. There was no laughter, no singing. Just a girl all alone who had forgotten how to speak. Not because she couldn't, Maya continued, but because her heart had gone quiet. The little girl's crayon paused. But one day, someone came. They didn't talk much either. They just sat beside her, not asking for smiles, just being there. And slowly her heart began to whisper again. Ava looked up just for a moment. Her eyes, which seemed so much older than 5, met Maya's before quickly looking away. She tugged on her silver locket, gently. Before Maya could say more, a voice cut through the room like a blade. Do you really think bedtime stories are a replacement for trained therapists? Maya turned, quickly. A man stood in the doorway, tall and composed, dressed in a sharp navy suit. His face was unreadable, but his presence filled the room with a cold, heavy gravity. Maya began, her voice small. I was just trying to make her feel a little less alone. He stepped forward, his hands in his pockets, his gaze clinical. You are not the first to try, nor will you be the last. But Ava does not respond to theatrics. Maya straightened her spine. It was not theatrics. It was kindness. His eyes dropped to Ava. The little girl was watching Maya, now her crayon still idle in her hand. He looked away. Keep her safe. Nothing else matters. And with that, he turned and disappeared. Down the silent hall. Maya exhaled slowly and sat back, beside Ava on the floor. The little girl reached into her coloring box and handed Maya the purple crayon. Maya smiled, a bittersweet feeling blooming in her chest, her heart quietly breaking and healing all at once. Maya returned the next day, and the day after that. Brooke had warned her that the Kane family rotated through nannies and sitters like seasons, but Maya never asked why. She simply showed up on time, smiled, and sat on the rug beside Ava with a book or a quiet craft. She did not force conversation. She did not ask Ava about her mother, her school, or the sadness that lingered in her eyes like a permanent shadow. She only read stories sometimes, with silly voices, and drew clumsy animals that made Ava's lips twitch in the faintest hint of amusement. Their bond formed not with grand declarations, but in shared silences and small gestures. When Maya noticed Ava staring at a butterfly just outside the window, she quietly folded one from a piece of origami paper and tucked it into Ava's coloring book. The next day, Maya found 2 more paper butterflies left on her bag. Sometimes they played a soft, made-up game where Maya pretended to be a terribly ungraceful princess who tripped over her own shoes and forgot all the rules of being royal. Ava's shoulders would shake in silent laughter, and once, just once, she giggled out loud. It was a light fluttering sound that made Maya freeze, her heart swelling with an emotion too tender to name. Unbeknownst to her, Jackson Kane often watched from the shadows of the hallway. He never interfered, never spoke, just observed. He saw how Ava responded to Maya in ways she hadn't with anyone in months. Not since the hospital, not since the funeral, not since her world had become a place of whispered voices and too many locked doors. Maya never noticed the man in the shadows. Her attention was always completely on Ava. She tied shoelaces, wiped tiny hands, and waited patiently when Ava needed long minutes to answer a simple question. She never looked bored, never looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. One night after Ava had fallen, asleep in the armchair with her head on Maya's lap, Maya gently carried her to bed with the help of the housekeeper. She lingered for a moment, watching. The little girl breathed peacefully under the soft glow of the nightlight, then turned to leave. Passing by the dim library on her way out, she caught sight of someone inside. Jackson sat alone in a large leather armchair, a drink untouched in his hand. Resting on his lap was a framed photo of a woman with soft features and warm eyes, clearly Ava's mother. His expression was not one of tears, but of someone holding back years of them. Maya hesitated, unsure if she should leave quietly or speak. Before she could decide, he looked up. "You do not need to tiptoe," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "She is a sound sleeper when she feels safe." Maya stepped closer, but not too close. "She's a wonderful little girl," he nodded, slowly, his eyes still fixed on the photograph. "She used to laugh all the time. She had her mother's joy. Then She stopped. There was a heavy silence. Then he looked at Maya directly. You do not seem intimidated by this place or by me. Most people are. Maya met his gaze without flinching. I grew up in a place with locked doors and too many rules. Orphanages are not all that different from mansions. His brows lifted slightly, a flicker of surprise in his guarded eyes. And, no, she added, her voice quieter. I am not afraid of you. Why? Not? He asked, genuinely curious. Everyone else sees a cold, broken widower clinging to his past. Maya studied his face for a long moment, then spoke simply. I see a father who is trying, even if no one else gives him credit for it. For a moment, he did not move. Then gently Jackson placed the photo frame face down on the side table as if letting the past rest for the night. It was a small thing, barely worth noticing, but to Maya it felt like everything. Maya opened the refrigerator once afternoon to find it nearly empty. There was no milk, no fruit, just a lonely jar of olives and a wedge of expensive cheese that Ava would never touch. Ava was watching her quietly from her usual spot on the rug. There's no more milk, she said, her voice soft. Maya crouched beside her. Do you want some for your cereal? Tomorrow? Ava nodded, clutching her stuffed bunny a little tighter. Okay, Maya smiled. Then we'll fix that. She scribbled a quick note, went to get groceries back in 20 on a sticky pad from her bag, and slipped out the side door. The corner market was just a 10-minute walk. Maya bought a half-gallon of organic milk, a small carton of strawberries, and a few granola bars she knew Ava liked. She didn't think twice about using her own money. It wasn't about who should pay. It was about a little girl who needed breakfast. By the time she returned, the housekeeper had already seen the note and looked mildly annoyed. Maya apologized and quietly unpacked the groceries into the fridge. No one said thank you. No one even asked why she'd gone. That night, after she had read Ava to sleep and gathered her things to leave, she found a small white envelope tucked under her bag. Inside was the exact amount she had spent at the store, down to the last cent, and a short note in elegant, sharp handwriting. This is reimbursement, but I owe you more than money. Thank you. There was no name, no signature, but she knew it was from Jackson. The next day, Maya arrived to find Ava practically buzzing with excitement. Daddy said we have a surprise, she whispered, pulling Maya's hand eagerly. The surprise was at the far end of the house, where a previously unused sunroom had been transformed almost overnight. Gone were the dusty chairs and forgotten drapes. In their place stood a miniature indoor castle, complete with turrets, twinkling lights, and plush cushions shaped like clouds. On one side was a cozy reading nook with soft rugs and a basket, overflowing with fairy tale books. On the other, a dress-up corner with tiny tiaras and soft velvet capes. The whole space smelled of lavender and new paint. Maya blinked in disbelief. What is this place? Ava beamed. It's our castle. Daddy made it for us. Later that day, as Maya helped Ava into a sparkly cape, she remembered a conversation from the week before. She had quietly shared with the housekeeper that Ava had been teased at a playdate for not having a mom. Maya had spoken gently, not as a complaint, but as something she wished she could help Ava heal from. She had never expected anything to come of it. Yet now, here was a space, a sanctuary, that told Ava she wasn't missing anything. That joy could still be built. That magic could still be made. Maya found Jackson standing by the door, watching them. You did this? She asked, awe in her voice. He nodded once. She needed a world where she gets to be the hero, not the girl with a missing piece. Maya swallowed past the lump rising in her throat. It's beautiful. He looked at Ava, who was twirling in her cape, her giggles echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Then he said almost too quietly for her to hear, she only started believing in stories again because of you. Maya met his gaze. For the first time, she saw not just the cold, careful businessman, but a man who remembered how to love and was slowly clumsily, learning how to show it again. It began with a cough, just a small one, but it was persistent. Ava looked pale during their story. Time, her head resting heavily on Maya's shoulder. Her words were slower than usual. By the time Maya tucked her into bed that evening, the little girl was burning with fever. Maya rushed to tell the housekeeper, but the woman only shrugged. Mr. Kane prefers to call the doctor in the morning. He dislikes middle of the night emergencies. Maya stood there, stunned. She's 6 years old. She has a fever of 102. The housekeeper pursed her lips. You are not family. It is best not to overstep, but Maya did. She brought a cool cloth for Ava's forehead and coaxed her into sipping water. She sat beside her bed through the entire night. She hummed lullabies softly, the same ones her own caretaker at the orphanage used to sing when she was sick and had no one. She rubbed Ava's back gently when she whimpered in her sleep. She read fairy tales in a low, soothing whisper, even when her own voice cracked with exhaustion. Maya didn't notice the hours passing. She only saw the child so fragile and vulnerable, clinging to her, bunny and whispering for her mother in fevered dreams. Dawn was just breaking when Jackson found them. He had been alerted by the night staff, but no one had prepared him for what he saw. Maya was curled on the floor beside his daughter's bed, wrapped in a thin blanket, her hand resting protectively on Ava's. Her eyes were half closed, her face pale from lack of sleep, but her posture was steady, calm. He didn't speak immediately. He just watched them in the golden morning light, his daughter, breathing easier, her fever finally lowered. The room was filled with a quiet warmth he hadn't known for years. Maya stirred and looked up. She's doing better, she whispered. Her fever broke around 4 a.m. He nodded. Thank you. She stood up, slowly trying to gather her things. I know I stayed beyond my hours. I couldn't leave her like that. Jackson walked to the window, the sunlight catching the lines of weariness on his face. You did what no one else in this house would have done. Maya paused, because it was the right thing. He turned toward her, then gestured for her to follow. Come with me. She hesitated but obeyed, trailing behind him through the silent corridors. They stepped outside onto a covered back porch where the early light painted the lawn in soft gold. A gentle breeze rustled the hedges. It was peaceful. Jackson leaned on the railing. You remind me of my wife. Maya blinked. That's unexpected. She was quiet like you. Fiercely kind. She used to say that children don't remember what you buy them, only how you made them feel safe. Maya joined him at the railing. She sounds extraordinary. She was, he said and exhaled as if releasing years of grief he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Losing her. It was like losing the map to my own life. I just kept working, building more, earning more, but I couldn't fix what was truly broken. He glanced at her. Then I was terrified Ava would grow up knowing only nannies and silence, that she would never feel what a mother's touch could be. Maya swallowed hard, her own chest tight with emotion. I am not her mother. No, he agreed, softly, but you have given her something I could not. Warmth. Laughter. A sense of being seen. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind tugging gently at Maya's hair. Then slowly his voice lowered. I never imagined my heart could feel anything again. She turned to him. He looked directly into her eyes. Until tonight. The world quieted around them. There were no grand declarations, no passionate speeches, just the deep, raw truth of two lonely souls who had found each other, not through romance, but through the shared ache of love lost and the quiet beauty of love rediscovered. The days that followed were unlike anything Maya had ever known. The mansion, once so cold and imposing, had softened into something closer to a home. Ava thrived under Maya's quiet, steady warmth. She giggled more, slept better, and drew pictures in bright, hopeful colors. One day, taped proudly to the refrigerator, was a crayon drawing. It showed 3 stick figures, one tall with brown hair, one small, girl with curls, and one woman in a yellow dress. Above them, a bright sun was shining, and the words were scrawled, "Me, Daddy, and Miss Maya, at the park." That Sunday they went to the park just like the picture said. A week later, Jackson approached her with an invitation. "There's a charity gala here this Saturday," he said, his voice slightly unsure for the first time. "Would you consider coming?" "Not as the sitter. As my guest." Maya hesitated. I don't have anything to wear for something like that." "I took care of that," he said gently. When the day came, a stunning navy blue gown was waiting for her in her room. It was simple, elegant, completely her style. Maya ran her fingers across the soft fabric, her breath catching. It had been a very long time since anyone had thought she deserved something so beautiful. She stepped into the grand ballroom that evening with a quiet, unassumed grace. Jackson stayed close, his hand resting gently at the small of her back. He introduced her simply as a dear friend, his voice proud, not apologetic. But Maya could feel the eyes on her. "She's the sitter, isn't she?" whispered one woman behind a raised champagne glass. "The orphan girl, right?" another said with a condescending smirk. "Honestly, it's sweet. He thinks he's rescuing her. She probably thinks she's the next Mrs. Kane." Maya kept her composure, but her hands trembled slightly as she excused herself. She found the restroom, locked the door, and braced her palms against the cool marble sink. Her reflection stared back at her, looking too fragile for this room of diamonds and polished smile. She wanted to leave, to run back to her simple apartment. But instead she dabbed her eyes, took a deep breath, and walked out toward the balcony for some fresh air. The night was cool and quiet. She stood in the shadows, her heart still rattling in her chest. Jackson found her moments later. "There you are," he said. Then he noticed the tension in her face. "What happened?" Maya didn't turn. "You know what happened." He was quiet for a beat. Then his voice darkened, not with anger, but with a fierce protectiveness. "They don't know you. And frankly, I don't care what they think." She finally looked at him, her eyes glistening. "They think I don't belong here." He stepped closer, closing the space between them. "Maya, you belong more than anyone in this room tonight. Because while they care about appearances, you care about people. You've given my daughter her smile back. You've given me my soul back." He paused, his voice low but firm. "Let them whisper. I brought you here because you belong with us." She blinked, the thread of tears rising again, but this time they were not from shame, but from something else entirely. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." And for the first time that night, as he led her back to the music, she did not feel small. She felt seen. Maya stood in the drawing room, where light once danced off crystal, chandeliers and polished floors. Now it felt dim and cold, as sterile as a courtroom. The late afternoon sun streamed in through the tall windows, sharp and unforgiving. Shadows stretched across the walls like silent judges. She stood alone in the center of the room. No one had spoken the word thief, but it was everywhere. It was on the tight-lipped faces of the staff, in the stiff posture of the senior housekeeper clutching a printed inventory. She had not stolen anything. She knew that. But in a house where wealth demanded perfection, truth seemed to matter less than assumption. Outsiders were never quite trusted. Her voice was calm, but it shook slightly at the edges. "I never even entered the room with Mrs. Kane's jewelry. I have no idea what was taken." Silenced, she turned to the people she had worked beside for weeks. The cook she once helped carry groceries. The housemaid who had asked for her advice. The butler who once smiled at her kindness. Now they looked through her, past her as if she were no longer real. Her eyes finally found Jackson, standing near the fireplace. His navy suit fit perfectly as always, but his shoulders looked heavier than she'd ever seen them. His hands were clenched into tight fists at his sides. He would not meet her gaze. "Jackson," she said softly, her voice almost a plea, Tell them you know I wouldn't do this." For a long, aching moment, he said nothing. Maya watched his jaw twitch. His eyes flicked toward her, then to Ava, then to the floor. His chest rose with a breath he couldn't seem to release. She saw it then. It wasn't cruelty, not even disbelief. It was fear. He was afraid of being wrong, of being made a fool in front of his staff. He was afraid of what it meant to trust someone who had come from nothing. And that was so much worse than rage. It was betrayal wrapped in cowardice. The silence pressed down on her, like a physical weight. She blinked, trying to breathe, trying to stay upright. "I see," she whispered, her voice cracking. On the single word. With trembling fingers, she reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out the little plastic watch Ava had given her, a unicorn, band with glitter already worn at the edges. It had been a gift, a symbol of belonging. She unfastened it slowly and placed it on the table beside her, a memory too sacred to carry into exile. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice steadier now. "Not because I did anything wrong, but because I believed I had found a home here." And with that she turned and walked toward the door. Her steps were slow, deliberate, dignified in the way only someone utterly shattered could be. The silence finally cracked. A sharp cry pierced the air behind her. "Maya!" Tiny footsteps thundered toward her. She barely had time to turn before Ava flung herself into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. You can't go, the little girl wailed, her arms clinging tightly to Maya's neck. "You didn't take anything. You're the nicest person in the whole world." Maya knelt, hugging her tightly, her own tears soaking into Ava's soft curls. For a moment, the world shrank to the warmth of a child who knew truth when the adults had failed. "I know you believe me, sweetheart," she whispered, "and that's all that matters." Behind them, footsteps echoed again. Jackson had entered the room fully. Now. He stopped a few feet away, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. Ava turned to him, pure anger and heartbreak radiating from her tiny frame. "Why won't you say anything?" "Daddy," she cried, "why are you just standing there? She's our Maya." His lips parted, and for a breath, just one, Maya thought he might finally speak. But then he looked down. He looked away. He said nothing. Ava's face crumpled in devastation. "Why won't you fight for her?" Jackson's hand clenched into a white-knuckled fist at his side. His eyes shone with unshed tears, but still no words came. Maya kissed Ava's forehead. "Be strong, keep smiling, and always believe in your heart, no matter what anyone says." Then, like pulling her soul from her body, she gently loosened Ava's arms from her neck. The little girl collapsed to the floor in sobs as Maya rose and walked away. Her back was straight, her face was wet, and her hands were clenched tightly around nothing. The staff watched in silence. No one moved. At the threshold, Maya paused. She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance back at Jackson. He hadn't moved, but his eyes were on her now, and they were filled with guilt, pain, and unbearable regret. But it was too late. She gave a single final nod, a farewell not of bitterness, but of clarity. Then she opened the door and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit her like a slap of truth. It was brisk, biting, but it was clean. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself and walked down the grand steps one by one. She had once dared to believe that love could build bridges across class, grief, and pain. But now she knew. Love without courage is just silence. And silence had never protected anyone. 1 month had passed since Maya walked out of Jackson Kane's life. In that time, the mansion had returned to its former silence, but it no longer felt elegant. It felt abandoned, like a grand stage after the actors have gone home. Ava's laughter, which had once echoed through the halls, had faded back to whisper. She still smiled, still played, but a part of her had quietly closed itself off again. Jackson noticed. He noticed every time she sat quietly by the castle playroom now, collecting a thin layer of dust. Every time she looked at her drawings, then tucked them away. Every time she whispered "Miss Maya" in her sleep. He noticed, too, that he could no longer look at his own reflection without seeing the man who let kindness walk out the door. For the past month, Jackson had thrown himself into his work, meetings, deadlines, expansion, plans. His empire grew, but his soul shrank, because none of it brought Maya back. And late at night, in the stillness of his study, the guilt would creep in like a suffocating tide. I didn't protect her. I let them doubt her. I doubted her. Eventually, the guilt became too much to bear. He hired a private investigator, not to find Maya, but to find the truth. It arrived in a plain manila folder. The missing necklace had been pawned in a nearby city under a false identity. The culprit was a former Kyo housekeeper, Grace. When confronted, she confessed everything. Her motive was simple jealousy, spite, a bitter belief that Maya was forgetting her place. Jackson stared at the folder for a long time. He didn't speak. He didn't shout. He simply closed it and laid it gently on the desk like a tombstone for the moment he failed. The one person he loved. That night he sat on Ava's bed after tucking her in. She seemed older now. Still little, still sweet, but more guarded. She looked up at him. You think about her too, don't you? Jackson blinked, his throat tight. Yes, honey. I do. Ava played with the hem of her blanket. She didn't take it. Daddy. I knew it then. I know, Jackson whispered, his voice thick with regret. He reached for her hand. I should have said something that day. I should have stood by her. Ava was quiet for a moment, then said, I think she would have forgiven you if you just told her the truth. Jackson looked away, the beyond weight of his failure crushing him. She deserved better than my silence. I let fear speak for me. I let my pride keep me frozen. He stood, brushing a gentle kiss on Ava's forehead. If I ever see her again, he said softly, making a promise to his daughter and to himself, I won't hesitate. I'll say everything I should have said, and I'll fight for her, for you, for the life we almost lost. Next morning, while distractedly reading the newspaper, a small headline tucked in the corner of the community spotlight section stopped his breath. Once a child, without a home, now a teacher of hope. Maya Rhodes opens free school for underprivileged children. There she was in the photo, standing before a modest brick building surrounded by smiling children. Her blonde hair was tied back. Her dress was simple, but her eyes, the same steady, luminous eyes he'd fallen for, shone with a powerful purpose. The article told the story of a girl who had grown up forgotten, but refused to let other children feel the same. It spoke of chalk-stained fingers, of free art supplies, of bedtime, snacks she'd baked herself. It spoke of how she made every single child feel like they mattered. Jackson read it 3 times. Then he stood, walked straight to Ava's room, and held out the paper. She gasped. It's her. Yes, he said, his voice firm with a newfound resolve. It's her. And it's time we bring her home. This time he wouldn't let silence speak for him. He would speak with his heart. The morning sun spilled gently through the classroom windows, painting the room in hues of honey and gold. Maya, as always, moved between the small wooden desks with a quiet joy. She was fixing a misshapen letter. Here, untangling a friendship bracelet there, encouraging a shy child of color outside the lines. It was a perfectly ordinary morning until the door creaked open. She barely glanced up, assuming it was a late parent or a volunteer. But then she froze mid-sentence, her voice catching in her throat. Standing there in the doorway all by herself was Ava. The little girl wore a bright yellow sundress, her curls tied back with a pink ribbon. In her tiny hands she held something wrapped in fabric, clutched tightly to her chest. She didn't say a word. She just smiled and began walking, slowly, deliberately toward Maya. Maya stood up, her own hands trembling. Ava, the classroom hushed. The children sensed something important was happening. Crayons stopped moving. Conversations halted mid-whisper. Ava reached Maya and wrapped her arms around her waist. I missed you, she said softly into Maya's side. So much. Before Maya could find her voice to answer, another shadow appeared in the doorway. Jackson, He stepped into the room with quiet resolve. No suit, no armor. Just himself, in a plain shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his eye fixed on Maya like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. Maya's breath hitched. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't blink. Jackson paused as he entered fully, every child's eyes now on him. The whole class held its breath. He began walking slowly between the rows of tiny desks and crayon-stained worksheets until he reached her. Then silently he knelt, right there on the classroom rug, surrounded by spelling boards and scuffed shoes and pure, simple innocence. Gasps echoed across the room. One little boy whispered loudly, "Is he going to marry her?" A girl squealed. Someone clapped prematurely. Jackson smiled just slightly, then took the item from Ava's hands and unwrapped it. It was a small hand-carved wooden ring, imperfect and beautiful. The words "your family" were etched unevenly along the grain. "I don't have diamonds," Jackson said, his voice raw and full of emotion. "I don't have a perfect speech. Just this ring Ava made because she wanted it to say what we feel." He looked up at Maya, his eyes shimmering with everything he had failed to say before. "You once told me you didn't need grandeur, just truth. I failed you when it mattered most. I let fear and pride speak louder than love. And for that, I will be sorry for every day that I breathe." He reached for her hand, his voice growing steadier, stronger. "But today, I came with the only thing I have left to offer, my heart, and a promise. Maya, will you come home? Not just to a house, to us, to this family that has never felt whole without you." The room was silent for a heartbeat, then one small clap, then another, and suddenly the entire classroom erupted. Children leaped to their feet, cheering, clapping, and dancing around in innocent celebration. Maya stood still, her hand covering her mouth as tears of relief and joy streamed freely down her face. She looked at Ava, whose eyes were wide with hope, then at Jackson, kneeling not in perfection but in true humility. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper through the storm of emotion in her chest. "Yes!" Jackson exhaled like he hadn't truly breathed in a year. Ava squealed with pure joy and wrapped both of her arms around Maya's waist, hugging them all together. Maya slid the simple wooden ring onto her finger, trembling as the weight of it, of all that it meant, settled into her skin. A few years later, the same sunrise that had once been a lonely castle was now filled with life. Ava, now a bright-eyed 9-year-old, sat on a plush cushion, patiently reading a picture book to her baby brother, Leo, who gurgled happily in her lap. Jackson stood behind Maya, his arms wrapped around her as they watched their children. The room was no longer just a playroom. It was the heart of their home. "I almost let this slip away," Jackson whispered into her hair, his voice still thick with gratitude. Maya leaned back against him, placing her hand over his. "But you didn't," she said softly. "You came back. You fought for us." He kissed the top of her head. "You taught me how to fight, Maya. You taught me that a home isn't built from stone and steel, but from courage, forgiveness, and love." And in that sun-drenched room, surrounded by the laughter of their children, Maya knew she wasn't a visitor in a fairy tale anymore. She was home. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, loss, and redemption. Maya and Jackson's story is a beautiful reminder that true kindness never fades, that hearts can heal, and that family is not just about blood, but about the people who choose to stay, to believe, and to love you without condition. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or brought a tear to your eye, we invite you to be part of our growing community. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more powerful, emotional tales that heal the soul and warm the heart. We share stories that matter, stories that remind us all of what it truly means to be human. Until next time, take care and never stop believing in second chances.